In this video I'm going to be reviewing the Xindi Aquatic Dreadnought Carrier Tier 6, which is a replacement for the much loved Tier 5 Narcine, and the Xindi Reptilian Escort Tier 6, which is a replacement for the Tier 5 Contortrix Escort. The Tier 6 Xindi Carrier is available in the latest edition of the Infinity Lockbox, and the Tier 6 Xindi Escort is available from the Lobi store. Now, before I begin, I would like to give a very special thank you to Wigberg at Saturn44, who donated both of these ships to me for the purposes of producing this video. Thank you very much for helping me to promote Star Trek Online. Now, we've got a lot to cover in this video, so let's get started with the Tier 6 Aquatic Dreadnought. Now, I know this isn't news to many players, but the Tier 5 Narcine is still a very much relevant ship even today, with its strong base stats, highly maneuverable for its size, excellent BOF layout, and 2 hangar bays with awesome frigate pets. The new Tier 6 has some really big shoes to fill, and where to go with it would have given the ship designers moments of pause, I dare say. Now let's see what they've done with the styling. Well, it appears they've added new fins around the nose section and made some adjustments to the mid and dorsal area and wing sections, just given the general shape a bit of a freshen up. There is also a new hull skin pattern which suits the ship very well. This is one of my favourite ship types from the TV shows. I absolutely love it. Now down to the nitty gritty. From the outset, it looks like the Tier 6 Aquatic Dread builds on the solid foundations that it had in the Tier 5, with no changes to its shield modifier, subsystem power bonuses, hull strength, impulse modifier, or turn rate. In a nutshell, they've just updated the BOF stations to include 2 specializations, passives for the console, and a starship trait. The console is called the Cascade Resonance Catalyst and is now enhanced for T6. As before, it is a stacking resist debuff and kinetic damager that gains its stacks from bouncing off nearby ships regardless if they're a friend or a foe. The passives gained from the enhanced console is plus 10% to exotic damage and plus 20% to flight turn rate. The starship trait is called Chemosite Overload, which applies radiation damage and a resist debuff to your foe when they are hit by your beam overload. I'm keen to see what this does in PvP. I've only done a little bit so far in Karat, but in PvE it's done about 1 to 2k DPS. Beam Overload is a single target attack, and that doesn't really feature on too many PvE builds. Now, I tested this trait with Super Weapon Ingenuity, the Starship trait, which gives you an additional Beam Overload 1, and it applied the Chemosite Overload again. Now, I didn't test it with the Overproc beams, because I don't have a set anymore after it was nerfed in Season 13. But if anyone has done testing on that, I'd love to know how it went. And finally, the Bridge Officer Stations. The Lieutenant Commander Universal is now an Intel specialization seat. This opens up some PvE and PvP possibilities, most notably Override Subsystem Safety 3. The potential DPS addition just from that is massive. The Lieutenant Science has a command seat, which allows you to put some of the more popular command abilities in, like Rally Point Marker. So in isolation, a very decent ship with a great BOF layout, awesome pets, and a so-so console, and a decent ship trait on the outset. But this ship has one massive problem that it may not be able to overcome. its Tier 5U variant. In terms of value for money, this ship makes the Tier 5U a bargain. If the ship trait, console passives and buff changes don't really do it for you, then the Tier 5U is the perfect ship for you. Pretty much everything else between the two are exactly the same. I note that the Tier 5U price has doubled in price on the exchange since this week's patch, but at below 80 million EC, it is a bargain compared to the Tier 6 at around 400 million EC. Now, that being said, I think the trait does have some potential in certain situations, possibly PvP. The limited testing I did in Karat, I was getting max 1 hits of between 15 and 20k. That was, only like a 2 or 3 minute battle, so I haven't really done like a long stint with that trait. Also, you do only have 5 starship traits. What do you drop to put that starship trait in? So, as a die-hard fan of this ship, the refresh and the small changes that come with it are worth it in my opinion, as they make an epic dread carrier even more so. So let's move on to the Xindi Reptilian Escort. I remember when this ship came out in Tier 5 form, it was the very last of the Tier 5s to be released before Tier 6, and because of that I never really got to use it as much as I wanted to, and that is something that I've always regretted, especially for PvP. So let's see what the Tier 6 brings us. Like the Aquatic Dread carrier, the Reptilian Escort has received a small exterior refresh focusing on the nose and dorsal area. The skin pattern changes are much less subtle than the Aquatic Dread changes, if any, so we do have to dig a little bit deeper to see what else has changed. I'll start with the console. In Xindi Weapons Platform, now enhanced for Tier 6. I'm sorry to report that still, even in 2-piece Xindi console buffed form, this console is next to useless. Well, the platform is next to useless. I really think Cryptic missed out on an opportunity to do something with the platform, because it certainly doesn't do anything resembling this. You will be lucky to get 1 to 200 DPS from it. The passives are interesting though, and you may fit it just for them. You get a 7.5 increase to all your subsystem hard caps, taking them from 125 to 132.5. This means if you can chain emergency powder weapons and have full uptime on it, you can have 132.5 weapons power. For engineers, this should stack with their EPS power transfer captain ability also. The other passive is plus 50 to attack readiness. Now next is the heavy weapon called the Heavy Proton Charge. This is by far the surprise of the entire 2 ships released. Like all heavy weapons, it is 360 degrees, and they will fire heavy proton charges that will seek out the nearest foe and then detonate with damage that can affect up to 3 foes. The damage type is proton and therefore is buffed by a very small amount of proton buffs out there, as well as Cat 2 damage buffs like Alpha and Omega and that sort of thing. This is a hard-hitting weapon, and I was seeing between 30 and 40k hits on NPCs many times. In a damage sync test with a moderate debuff, it achieved 10k DPS on its own, but I believe it is capable of more than that. The issue with this weapon is that you have no control over what it hits. It will seek out the nearest foe to itself, not you. One good thing is that they do persist for up to 60 seconds if they are released and there's nothing in range. And you can have a maximum of 6 charges out at any one time before you can't release anymore. And like I said, it will if it doesn't find anything in 60 seconds, it will time out. It got Crit X, which is a small buff to critical chance and severity at Ultra Rare, and it got the standard accuracy and damage at Epic. I can't wait to see what this weapon is capable of doing in PvE and PvP, as I believe this is truly a challenger to the railgun, finally. The only thing that could hold it back is the way the charge chooses its target, i.e. the closest. The ship trait is called self-replicating hull. Now when you activate auxiliary to structural integrity field, auxiliary to dampeners, or auxiliary to battery, it will add 10 to your resist and 10% to your passive hull regeneration, and it will stack up to 3 times. I don't think that the players will be fitting it for the resist buff, but there are some players out there I know that are toying around with high in-combat regeneration rates, and they may want to tinker with this to see what it can add, but in my opinion this trait is pretty weak sauce. The bridge officer stations have also received 2 specializations. Lieutenant Commander Engineering has now got a temporal seat, and the Lieutenant Universal has got a pilot seat. I believe fitting a temporal specialization to this ship will weaken its appeal. A combination of pilot intel would have made it much more appealable to both PvE and PvP alike. Size, who want an escort may give it a go, but there are better escorts out there for size than this one. It's a tough one really. It really limits who will purchase this ship to actually want to use it and not just for the heavy weapon. Before I go into my ratings, I just want to show you what the console set bonuses are for the remainder of the other 2 Xindi consoles. So the 2-piece bonus gives you plus 10% impulse speed and plus 100 resistance to inertia debuffs. The weapons platform also gets a boost, but it's still pretty crap. The 3-piece will cause all Xindi pets within 10 kilometers of you to gain 20% firing cycle haste, and don't forget there's not just the frigates, there's also the fighter size pets as well. And the 4-piece is a cooldown reduction upon activation of one of the consoles to the other 3 by 15 seconds, and there is no global cooldown here. So the other 2 consoles from the other 2 Tier 6 Xindi ships released a couple of years ago is the Subspace Kimsite Deployment Console, which comes from the Xindi Primate Dreadnought Cruiser, and the Infectious Biomatter Generator, which comes from the Xindi Insectoid Heavy Escort Carrier. So to my ratings, the Xindi Tier 6 Dreadnought Carrier. So for exterior styling, it is subjective, but for me, I've always liked it. It's 5 out of 5 for me. Interior functionality, I'm afraid it's a standard Lobi bridge. It's not even a ready room. It's 1 out of 5. It's just a really, really small bridge. Ship stats and BOF layout. Look, it's 4.5 out of 5 to me. It's nearly perfect in my opinion. The equipped console, it's 2.5 out of 5. On its own, I guess the console's okay, but in PvE there are better consoles that you would fit in place with this. In PvP, I guess for the right team, this console may be beneficial due to its debuff. The Starship trait, I'm going to give 3.5 out of 5 for now. Purely because in the right build, I think it will do a lot over and above what Beam Overload will do. They could have done a lot worse with this trait, I'm telling you right now. So overall, it is 4 out of 5. The Reptilian Escort. Exterior styling is 4 out of 5. I've always liked the shape and they haven't really changed it that much. Interior functionality, pretty much the same as the aquatic bridge. Very, very small, not much to do. 1 out of 5. The ship stats and BOF layout, I'm giving 2.5 out of 5. Purely because of what I said before, the temporal seating. I think they missed out on making a really great ship by having an intel seat in there. The heavy weapon, I thought about giving this 4.5 or even 5 out of 5. I'm going to give it a 4 because it's losing a point because of the limited control of where of what you can target. Like I said, it goes for the nearest foe to itself or to the charge itself. The equipped console, struggled with this one a little bit. Normally it would have only been a 1 out of 5 because it's just completely ineffective, but I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5, and it's purely because it's passives, lifting the hard cap of all your subsystems by 7.5. And finally the Starship trait. Look, 2 out of 5, the resist buff is a bit meh, but there could be some applications where getting 30% increase to your hull regen may be good for certain builds. Overall, I'm going to give the Xindi Reptilian Escort Tier 6 3 out of 5. The BOF layout really lets it down for me, and pretty much on how I like to build Escorts. But there will be players out there that can make a good build from it. Also, it comes with pretty much the best heavy weapon since the railgun was released. Thank you very much for watching my video today, and we will see you next time.